Welcome to What Matters, a podcast that looks inward at unique experiences, upward for divine direction, and outward at God's activity in our world. I'm Michelle Funk, your host, and I'm so delighted that you're here with us today. I want to remind you to subscribe so that you won't miss any of our episodes. And oh my goodness, you get to meet somebody who does amazing work in our world, has a voice we all need to listen to, and is going to be helping us today just consider some things that are down the road for us in our current time and as women as we look ahead. So all of that to say is Jo Saxton is here. And I asked her, I'm gonna let her introduce herself because you're gonna love hearing from Jo. Welcome, Jo, how are you?
I'm doing very well, thank you. And it's great to be with you. It's great to be with you. In terms of introduction, I am a Brit. I grew up in London, in England. I'm Nigerian by heritage as well, both at the same time. I'm married to a guy called Chris, have two daughters, teenagers, and I'm a leadership coach, speaker, author, podcast host. I think that's about it.
I love it. Yay. Thank you for sharing and letting us know just a tiny bit about you and just for being here. Yay. So what matters? We're just going to talk a little bit about that, about what matters. What are you thinking about these days? What's top of the list?
Yeah, I think I was saying to you just before this that normally it's carbs, but with the carb loading having happened,
nicely done.
Like segued off. I have been thinking a lot about how this current crisis, pandemic reality is particularly impacting women, and even the nuance in that, particularly impacting women of color. And I've been watching and reading articles throughout the past year in terms of employment, in terms of experience of sickness, in terms of school. And I think it comes in waves. That's the reality of we are experiencing and seeing in the conversations I'm having with the leaders I coach, living a reality that we will have to think hard and long about and then act bravely in response to.
Yes, yeah. It's a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, and we're not just gonna wake up one day and say, oh, okay, done with that and move forward, right?
Absolutely. I've noticed like there were in the earlier days, it feels like it's been 7 years, but in the early days, I noticed people be like, okay, by the summer, and then we push it out to the fall, and then just the crescendo of expectation and then the crashing into another level of grief when we realized that even our best, you've got this, intentions or projections could not deliver the life we wanted. And then Thanksgiving, and then Christmas, and then New Year, and the weariness each time, getting up slower each time to make a projection, only to realize that we are not in control and life is still happening to us, outside of us.
Right, yeah. This phrase, it's going to look different this year, with like you said, with every holiday, with every event, with everything coming up, we're going to do it, but it's going to look different. That's been hard to say. And you said that big word, grief. I mean, man, hasn't that been a part of all of this? How do you think, what is grief doing to us right now?
I think it's been like the wallpaper in the room. I think more and more. Before we thought it was a cup we were drinking, and then it's everything. It's all around. Mm-hmm. And I remember reading this article by Harvard Business Review, and it said it was in April, and it said the discomfort you're feeling is grief. Mm-hmm. And just describing the reality of how it manifests itself in different ways. Because initially, for many of us, it wasn't the loss of life we were grieving of a loved one. Initially, it was the loss of a way of life. And then obviously, for many families, it was the reality of losing loved ones. Right. And then every member of that family living a grief of a life which feels discordant. And I remember speaking to a good friend of mine who is a psychologist, saying that the other issue with grief is that when we're feeling this collective grief, all the other griefs attach itself to it. Mm. So, the other experiences of grief that we may not have, that are still in our process journey, are also magnified in this moment. And so, I've come to see it as the wallpaper in our rooms. Mm-hmm. It's just there all the time. And sometimes we're more cognizant of its presence in others.
Yeah, yeah. And how do you see our role as a woman? I mean, what is it that you think maybe is particular to the experience of a woman with regard to the pandemic, where we're at, where we've come from, you know, what we've been through, what we're still going through, and then maybe coming out of this, resetting after, what's that going to look like?
Yeah, I mean, I think what I'm struck by is the sheer number of resets. Because where COVID in particular has been an accelerant exposing things that were already there, it has there was always women working through the work-life balance, or whatever phrase it was called that time. There was always women working through almost being sandwiched between generations, looking after their elders in their family as well as the next generation, regardless of their marital status, were taking care of multiple generations. That was always there. Now that has been magnified, and the level of anxiety around that's magnified. Now it's taking care of said relatives and saying, have you got your shot yet? And what does that look like for you? And are you vulnerable? And if you're vulnerable, can we visit you? And if we can't visit you, how do we keep your spirits up? How do we engage with you? Because as you said, it's going to look different this year. And then to the younger generation that we are either parents to, godparents to, aunties, big sisters to, there is are we educating them? There was a reason why we sent our kids to school, because we couldn't do it. We didn't want to. Do you know what I mean? And are we educating them? What are they missing? And the anxiety and the overwhelming sense of inevitable inadequacy, because you didn't train for this and there was no prep time for this. Right. And then as they grieve, the proms that have been missed, the homecomings, the rituals and the socialization and holding all of those things. And in that, all huge, big deals, and we haven't actually talked about what that woman herself is experiencing yet.
Right.
And the loss herself she's experiencing yet. I read in, I think it was in Forbes magazine, they initially called the impact of COVID on the economy, they described it as the pink collar recession. And others have called it the she-cession, because it has massively impacted professions that are primarily associated with women.
Right.
And again, what has that meant? And what does that mean? How has it been to hold a job down whilst teaching a child, whilst trying to present on Zoom that you are together, because you feel the vulnerability, and people having to make choices they never anticipated making. That when they thought of 2020, they weren't thinking of whether they were going to choose between their profession and their child's education in such a hands-on way.
Right.
So all of those things and more, I think, have been part of the reality of a woman's experience, and depending on what country you live on, the level of support you have in that realm,
yes,
is huge. Yeah, it's huge to process.
Yeah. Do you know some people, some women? Are they doing it? Are they doing this well? How who do you know that is rising up every morning and doing it? And maybe they don't have to be doing it well, but how has that looked like a little bit? I'll tell you, like at the beginning of this in our house, I have adult children, college age and adult children, and everybody came home and we had to vie for space. And I know that we're very fortunate to be able to have a little bit of space in our house, some internet connection. We each had a computer to use. I know all of those are things that not everybody has. And so, I'm grateful for that. But there was a little bit of elbow pushing around, and by the way, they're all guys, they're all males. So I'm the only woman in the house just vying for my spot. So of course, what am I doing? I'm considering the background. I'm considering what I'm going to hang on the wall behind me, all of this and that. I mean, it's my silly example but for us, they were all a part of that. And it was a way that, in a weird way, we connected in a different way than what we had ever done before. And it turned out to be kind of the running joke, what's mom gonna put on the wall next? And and hey mom, look at this angle of mine. They would intentionally point the camera up their nose and say, this is how I do online. I mean and so I'm not saying I was doing it well, but those were my first few days of the pandemic, is just trying to settle everybody and doing that through my lens of what was important to me, while trying to honor and just let them have their space and what, in a way that was important to them. But what about you? What are some women doing to get through this time, and how are they doing it?
I mean, I think doing is the key word there. I don't know if anybody knows necessarily whether they're doing it well. They're
Right.
just doing. And I'm part of a running club, and in the summer we were allowed. There was here where I am in Minnesota. There was a certain amount that you could do. We kind of managed what was possible. And hearing the stories of these different women whose businesses had fallen through the floor, and were in some ways were just coping with the reality. Others who were working out, were there kind of co-op groups that they could do with educating the children. Others who could give advice in some ways and saying, this is how it's been for me taking care of my parents. These are the questions I've been asking them. This is what they've been contending with. This is what it's looked like to advocate for the services that they may or may not be, that they don't know about. This is the unexpected crisis. So it's been everything from that to friends who have lost multiple family members. Yeah. There was one period where a friend of mine, every week we'd talk and another family member had passed from COVID. And so there's just a numbness. But I think for many, the weight of the losses in terms of processing them didn't hit until later on in the year. They were kind of like just going. So I don't know that. I think there have been the experimental things that people have done where they've tried to be creative, but there's been so much that's been revealed. I think for others, it's been, actually, my marriage isn't healthy. My relationships aren't healthy. Yeah. And this experience, this of being under the one roof, has been the crucible for our stuff. And the stuff we can't escape it. We can't go out to get away from it. All we've got are these walls. And it's exposing what to do. I think for some it has birthed creativity. For some it has been a reckoning with questions about how they were living their life, and is this how they wanted to live? And they realized no, they didn't actually want to work like that anymore. Yeah. For others, it has been the shock of that income was not superfluous. It was essential. It was essential income. And so the idea of having more time was not a joy and was not relaxing because their job isn't coming back. And I think it was the immediacy of so many of the layoffs, furloughed, and then I think that's what I'm seeing. So in terms of is there a way through? I think there have been multiple ways through that people are doing. I think what I've noticed though is the more isolated, the more vulnerable. That people need connection, meaningful connection. That's still true. That people have been. Actually, there's one thing I have noticed. I think the nature of friendship has been fascinating to watch. I think particularly when we've had this year of the pandemic and then this racial reckoning in the midst of it, a very brutal election cycle, and all the conversations about misinformation. I've seen a number of people say, and again, I've heard this from women across the country, saying, I didn't expect that conversation I had with that person. I don't know what we do now. And that wasn't about family members. That was about friends. I've heard that again and again and again and again, where friendships are not surviving the pandemic, are not surviving a conversation about masks, are not surviving, certainly not surviving a conversation about politics, and are not surviving conversations on race. Yeah. And that's been a very bewildering reality for many.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So your book, Ready to Rise, I know that we talked about it at the conference that we just had, and love your writing. This idea, though, of like resetting, rising, moving beyond, how might you encourage us?
Yeah, I think I want to encourage us by almost setting the tone of that, to say, rising doesn't have to feel victorious. Like victory isn't necessarily a good feeling at all. Rising doesn't have to be with a bounce, and it doesn't have to be at the same time as everybody else. Yeah. You might lift your head up, and that's your rising today. We're good. For some, they might rise up and sprint, but you might just get to your knees and it completely take everything you've got. So that's the first thing. It's not a prescription. There's not a prescriptive rising. The other thing, it may be in the decisions that we make. You decided to call a therapist, and it's the intentional act that will one day yield this kind of fruit in your life. That is actually what the rising looks like. But I think when when I think of the moment we're in, we still do have some agency. There's a lot we don't have control over. There's a lot we don't have access to, but we do have some agency. And with the agency that we have, what does it look like to rebuild our life for an emerging landscape? I prefer the phrase emerging landscape than new normal, because new normal suggests it's fixed.
Yeah.
And it's not, we ain't done. We're
Right.
still in the middle of this mess.
Yeah.
Whereas when I say emerging landscape, I almost imagine like the rubble after an earthquake or some natural disaster, and it's dirty and it's dusty, and every so often you can see just so far, and then it fogs over again, you can see just so far. And therefore it requires little incremental steps, because you can run, but you don't even know if there's a chasm right in front of you yet. And I think that's the reality of the world we're in. How do we begin to think through how we use our agency in an emerging landscape? And that may be an increased level of self-awareness of knowing who we are in the middle of this crisis. If we know that our grief is overwhelming us, and if we know that that it's getting really hard to get up in the mornings, and it's not because we've not slept, it's because we are burdened by depression, or if we know as we look at bills that we throw them away because the anxiety is overwhelmed, or whatever, whatever way anxiety manifests itself in our life, our rising is probably a doctor's appointment.
Right.
Actually, it's a doctor's appointment, or asking a friend to take you to that appointment, or to ensure that you do that appointment. If you realize that the impact of this crisis has awakened vices, maybe issues around your sobriety or whatever that haven't been issues for years, our rising is thinking, okay, is there an online group I can connect to?
Yeah.
On this. It's not like, and I'm over this, and this isn't going to defeat me, this isn't going to beat me. No, that actually in an emerging landscape, we do the little thing that will ultimately make a far more fundamental difference.
Yeah. Oh, that's good.
That's important.
So good. Absolutely. Yeah. It might be, like you said, very small incremental steps that then lead to that, where we can do the Rocky, song and dance. And
yeah, that'd be lovely, wouldn't it? But I don't know.
Yeah, no, it's going to take some time. Yeah. So we've had the pleasure of your company for our conference. I told you beforehand, I've been trying to do this for a long time with you. So what can we do? What else can we do down the road? What are you thinking for down the road? What are you gearing up for, working toward, looking at? What's just, and how can I be involved in it, basically? No.
Well, I do believe that the past few years, even pre-pandemic, have reminded us of the importance of women's stories and women's contribution in society. We've known the cost that everybody has paid with a woman's absence, whether it was in the stories that when we know that the Me Too movement began with Tarana Burke, but when in recent years it kind of lit a different fire, it became known in the public consciousness. I think that we were struck by when women aren't in the room, when women aren't at the table, when they don't have positions of authority and influence, when there is a price that everybody pays. Actually, everybody pays. But I think it's not just the Me Too movement that reminded us of that. I think we're seeing that again and again when we're seeing burnout levels and anxiety and stress within our systems and our culture and in our homes. And so, and again, there has been, in the current studies, questions asked about whether the pandemic has impacted the workplace and such that it's rolled back years of progress that women have made.
Right.
And so for me in this moment, I'm asking because I'm a leadership coach, I'm asking the question, what does it look like to equip women to lead right now in an emerging landscape? What does it look like to calibrate the stories and say, you may be down, but you're not out, to be curious in this moment in terms of because crisis uncovers a number of things. Crisis uncovers brokenness. It also uncovers capacity and gifts at times. There are people who have come in, we don't understand it. We can call it what we want. That almost doesn't matter. But people who have come into their own in this moment, and we see it in business with all these innovations. Every recession through history has been marked by, followed by this innovative kind of, we've got to find new ways of doing things. We need new ideas. Well, if we don't know what the future looks like, we actually do have to define it. We have to, now we can't control it, but we have to make some projection out there and move towards it. So what I'm looking at are just different models and different ways of gathering cohorts of women, online platforms. I already have one of those, a platform of women to coach, to say, okay, what does it look like for you to lead? How can you unpack your gifts, unpack the lessons you have from this moment, from this season, from this time, and use it to make your contribution for human flourishing, wherever you are, because it will need, when you have the kind of reset and the kind of earthquake culturally that we have had, we cannot afford to not be present in the rebuilding.
Yes, true. Oh my, that's so good. That is so good. Okay, I'm in. I want to do this with you, so let's just make that happen. It's gonna be hard work ahead, but so worth it. So worth it. You know?
I think so. We've got to pull something out of the ashes.
Yeah. Yeah. Please. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So just on a lighter note, what are some things that you've maybe learned about yourself or your family or done or experienced? You know, my silly examples, there's one more I'm going to share with you. We've established game night. And everybody in the house is in on it, you know? They actually want to do that. And so that's been like a really fun thing. And we're already wondering, is there any way we can continue that forward? Because that became a lost art in our house, apparently. And it's just been a joy. Have you experienced some small joys along the way? Some things that you're like, oh, that was good. I want to keep that going. Or...
Yeah, I think I have with the extended family now. I have family. Both of us have family in the UK. I also have a brother in Hong Kong. So extended family Zooms have been brilliant. Those have been good. Like when I'm connecting with my siblings or connecting with my husband's fam, that's just been like with my husband's fam. We've had these quizzes and board games and all these kinds of things that we've done internationally, kind of thing. That's been fun. And with my siblings, the Zoom chats have just been really great, just to talk and almost just scan the world on how things are going and all of that. That's really, really good.
Yeah.
That we'll keep in. I think with us as the family, I think we've just spent a lot. It's been so good to spend so much time together. It has, we would go for these road trips knowing we couldn't get out of the car. We couldn't get out of the car or go anywhere. One thing that we did do, one particular memory we didn't expect was the day after Boxing Day, the day after Christmas Day, which for a Brit is called Boxing Day. And in England it's a national holiday. So we still take it off because I still believe in it. And my husband had decided for his Christmas present, his birthday present, he wanted us to go dog sledding. And about 4 hours north, there's a lodge. Now, we couldn't go in the lodge because of social distancing, so everything happened outside. It was very cold, so we laid up and we drove up we got up at the crack of dawn. My kids got into the car and then promptly fell asleep again. And managed to get a drive-through DQ, which strangely tasted bizarrely fresh and nice, which we're all still slightly surprised by, but also very grateful. And then we went sledding, and it was so good to be outside. It was so good to do this completely different thing that none of us had done before and just be kind of driven around by these dogs across lakes and swampy areas that are all frozen over. And it was just I don't think we all realized how much we needed to be outside and how much we needed to have the space. And again, it was because there were other people doing it, but because you're all distanced on your no one's interacting with one another and everybody's fine with it. So there's a wave and you have the camaraderie of a wave, but there's no pressure to be near each other.
Yeah.
And then as soon as we were done, we got in the car, drove back home and went to bed. And it was just one of these weird kind of, did we do that all in a day?
Yeah.
We just spent 8 hours in the car just hang out with some dogs. And we're like, and it was worth it.
Yes.
It was a gift. It was a gift in so many ways to each and every member of the family for different reasons. And I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful for that. So yeah, and on a personal level, I think I've just spent a lot more time listening to music that I like.
Nice. Yeah.
I don't know what it was, whether it was just the kind of nostalgia trip, or 90s R&B that just made me feel nice and made me feel happy and gave me a chance to dance in my office. But that has, I'm sure that's saved. I'm sure it's been a great distraction, but sometimes those distractions are journeys to creativity in themselves. Sometimes they're just a distraction, but either way, they were fun. So yeah, I've loved it.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Both of those sound amazing. I love the day trip. That's awesome. That made some memories that'll,
Yeah.
that's been part of the deal too. How can we make some memories out of this time,
Yeah.
if possible, that are actually good memories? So well done. Well done. Yeah. So the last thing I thought I just might ask you about is how's your faith these days? I mean, how's it been? I guess I've wondered about myself. Maybe what am I learning? What is God trying to maybe teach me, or could perhaps teach me if I would only pay attention? What are the ways in which I can pay attention, I guess, has been a good question for me. And just, I don't know, what is there anything you want to say just with regard to faith right now?
Yeah. I have found, I think between the impact of both the pandemic, the economic impact of the pandemic, because for me, with my job being speaking and going to events, and they are still not back, that has been a massive cut. And then with the racial reckoning that is and uprising that's still happening in America, I think there was it's caused me to think simply. There's a simplicity that has been restored to my faith. Where it's like, Lord, I don't want all the junk. I just need your presence in the midst of the storm. And faith in hard times is not something this wasn't a first for me. I'm sure many of us have had maybe on smaller scales, an experience where we have met God in the crisis.
Right.
In the crisis year of a terrible diagnosis, in the crisis year of mourning, in the crisis year of and all of that. And I don't know that I've known it on so many fronts all at once, but I have encountered God in the crisis before, and it reminded me. I think my faith has become simpler again, and I've remembered the value of lament, of raw honesty, of prayer, and just being with God.
Yes.
I think those have been the things that have been and continue to be restored to my life.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. That's good stuff. Good stuff. Even on Zoom, it has been amazing to really have some true, raw, like you said, vulnerable, honest connection, with others as together. In this case, we've tried to encourage one another in our faith journeys, and, it looks different for everybody and all, but I love the idea of the simplicity can be just so powerful. And that'll be good for us to really hold on to and take with us, I think. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, my goodness. I have loved talking with you, Jo. Thank you for your time, for your willingness to do this with us, for being part of our conference, just for all of the things you do, the gifts in your writing and in your teaching and in your coaching. I just want to cheer you on and say, keep doing. It's so important. And your voice is one that we need to hear, in our world. And so I'm grateful for the opportunity to hear more from you personally, and also to just invite others to know a little bit more about you. So thank you. Thank you so much. It's been a joy to talk with you, and I'll wrap us up if that's okay. I know you have other things going on today, and so I just want to tell our listeners, our viewers, that's what matters. And I'm so glad that you've been a part of this conversation, and I look forward to seeing you the next time. So bye for now. Jo, thank you. Oh my gosh.
Thank you so much.
Yes, and plus you got the best power color going on right here, in I mean, honestly, you must have had a good carb lunch and a good power shirt. That's what it's all about, right?
Yeah, that's what you need. That's what it takes. The cultural moment.
Absolutely. You have such great wisdom. I truly mean it. Keep on praying for you and for all that you do, and just so excited to introduce you.